The moment December arrived, I felt the familiar tingle of holiday excitement. For years, decorating the house for Christmas had been my family's proud tradition. We strung lights along the roof, wrapped the trees in sparkling strands, and hung colorful ornaments along the fence. This year, we went bigger than ever. My kids ran around, placing little figurines of Santa and his reindeer, while my spouse carefully tested every strand of lights to make sure there were no flickers. By the evening, our house looked like a winter wonderland that belonged in a holiday magazine. Neighbors began to take notice immediately. Some stopped to compliment our creativity, snapping photos and asking for decorating tips. The smell of hot cocoa and pine-scented candles drifted into the crisp winter air, and our street felt alive with warmth and cheer. I thought of our HOA guidelines briefly. Yes, there were rules, but I was careful to avoid excessive brightness or installations that might obstruct sidewalks or streets. Everything was tasteful and festive. Then, on the third night of our display, it happened. A knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find Mrs. Karen Dempsey, our infamous HOA board member, glaring as though I had committed a crime against the neighborhood itself. She was dressed in her signature polyester blazer, holding a clipboard as though she had been summoned by some divine authority to enforce suburban law. "You need to take down these lights immediately," she declared. Her tone left no room for negotiation. "This is completely inappropriate and violates HOA regulations." I blinked, trying to suppress laughter. "Karen, they're just Christmas lights. We've checked the HOA guidelines, there's nothing here that's illegal or unsafe." She waved her hand dismissively. "I've already called the police. They'll be here to inspect this violation." My mind raced. Call the cops? For Christmas lights? I glanced outside and saw the neighbor kids staring at our display, wide-eyed with delight. How could anyone possibly see joy and wonder as a violation? I tried reasoning, showing her the guidelines printed from the HOA website. Karen wouldn't budge. That evening, the tension mounted as we waited for the police. My spouse whispered, "Do you think they'll actually care about Christmas lights?" I sighed. We knew HOA disputes could be absurd, but this felt entirely over the top. Sure enough, a squad car pulled up 30 minutes later, flashing lights painting our front yard in red and blue hues. 2 officers stepped out, looking confused as they surveyed the twinkling spectacle. My heart thumped in my chest. Could they actually cite us for festive joy? By the time the officers knocked, I had rehearsed my explanation. Our lights were safe, cheerful, and entirely compliant. I wasn't prepared, however, for Karen's smug expression as she pointed at the display. I could only hope for a miracle, or at least that common sense would prevail. The officers introduced themselves politely, though their eyes betrayed disbelief. One glanced at Karen, who nodded furiously, then back at our home glowing with multicolored brilliance. "Ma'am, sir," the taller officer began. "We received a complaint regarding your Christmas lights." He paused, clearly unsure how to proceed. "Can you explain the situation?" I gestured toward our decorations, feeling a mix of exasperation and holiday cheer. "These are our Christmas lights. We followed all the HOA guidelines regarding placement, brightness, and safety. I don't see a violation here." Karen jumped in immediately. "They're excessive. They disturb the peace. I've had multiple complaints from residents." The officer frowned and asked, "Did any residents file a written complaint?" Karen hesitated. "Well, no, but verbally, yes." The officer scratched his head, trying to remain neutral. "We can't enforce HOA rules. Those are civil matters, not criminal violations. Unless there's a safety issue or a law being broken, there's nothing we can do." Karen's face fell. I almost felt bad for her, but only almost. She turned red, sputtering arguments about community standards, visual pollution, and setting a bad example. The officers, maintaining polite neutrality, explained the limitations of their authority again. Meanwhile, my kids were peeking through the curtains, whispering, "Are the cops going to shut down Christmas?" I chuckled and reassured them, "No, they're just here to make sure everyone is safe." After 15 minutes of back and forth, Karen finally admitted defeat. "Sort of. I still think this is wrong," she said stiffly. "I'll be reporting this to the HOA board." As the officers left, shaking their heads in disbelief, I let out a relieved sigh. The adrenaline slowly faded, leaving me a mixture of laughter and frustration. My spouse muttered, "Only Karen could call the cops on holiday cheer." That night, as we admired our lights, I reflected on the absurdity of suburban politics. Karen's rigidity seemed to clash with the spirit of the season. For a moment, I wondered if the neighborhood would survive her vigilance, or if joy itself was now a punishable offense. But despite Karen's efforts, our lights shone brightly. Neighbors came by, bringing cookies and hot cider, celebrating together in defiance of one overly controlling HOA member. The laughter, the shared stories, and the twinkling decorations reminded me why we celebrated the holidays in the first place. To spread joy, not stress. I made a mental note to capture every moment for the HOA newsletter, anticipating Karen's inevitable complaint. If nothing else, this year's Christmas lights had become a story worth telling, and one we would remember for years to come. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA board. The subject line alone made me groan. Formal complaint regarding holiday decorations. Karen had apparently drafted a multi-page letter detailing how our lights disturbed the neighborhood aesthetic and encouraged visual chaos. I skimmed through, noting her use of bold text, exclamation points, and words like abomination and egregious. I forwarded the email to my spouse, who sighed audibly. She really thinks she's enforcing the law of Christmas. We discussed our options. We could remove the lights, but that felt like surrendering to absurdity. Alternatively, we could write a rebuttal, citing the HOA rules we had already followed. Finally, after some deliberation, we decided to fight, peacefully, legally, and with festive persistence. That evening, neighbors began to arrive. Word had spread quickly. Some brought snacks, others came to take photos or lend moral support. We realized that our little light display had become a rallying point. People shared stories of previous HOA absurdities, nodding in solidarity. One elderly neighbor even offered a humorous suggestion: next year, go full North Pole, with elves on the roof. Meanwhile, Karen continued her patrols, peeking from behind curtains or leaning over fences to check on our lights. Her disapproval was palpable, yet it only seemed to embolden our display. I made sure to turn on every strand, every figurine, every flicker of twinkling magic. The following board meeting was tense. Karen spoke first, presenting her grievances with meticulous precision. Other board members raised eyebrows, questioning her motives and the validity of complaints. We attended virtually, calmly showing photographs and referencing the official HOA guidelines. By the end, even Karen's allies struggled to defend the overreach. Still, she persisted. "It's about maintaining standards," she cried. "It's about the integrity of our community." We countered with a simple argument: Christmas lights do not threaten property values, safety, or order. In fact, they brought neighbors together. The irony was not lost on anyone present. By the time the meeting adjourned, the board decided there would be no action taken. Our lights were allowed to remain. Karen left fuming, but silently. A part of the neighborhood celebrated a small victory for common sense. That night, as the twinkling display reflected off frosty windows, I realized something. It wasn't about the lights themselves. It was about asserting joy in the face of unnecessary bureaucracy. And this year, the lights weren't just decorations, they were a statement. As the holidays progressed, our lights became something of a legend in the neighborhood. Cars slowed to admire them, and children pressed their noses to the windows in delight. Even those who had been neutral or skeptical began to smile, wave, and join in the holiday spirit. Karen, despite her continued complaints, seemed increasingly isolated. Her attempts to enforce conformity clashed with the genuine warmth spreading throughout the block. Slowly, neighbors began quietly rallying behind us, offering support through friendly gestures, baked goods, and cheerful greetings. Her power waned, while the community's joy grew stronger. By Christmas Eve, the neighborhood felt transformed. Our lights sparkled against the snowy backdrop, casting reflections on frost-covered lawns. The family gathered around with cocoa, laughter filling the air. Thankful not just for the decorations, but for the sense of togetherness they had inspired. The absurdity of the previous week faded into memory, leaving a story that would be retold every holiday season. I thought about the lesson we had learned. Sometimes, standing up for simple joy can seem confrontational. Some rules are arbitrary, some people overly rigid. But kindness, patience, and a little defiance in the name of celebration can win the day. We had defended more than lights, we had defended happiness, generosity, and the spirit of the season. Karen's calls and complaints became almost comical in hindsight. The police had confirmed there was no violation. The HOA had sided with reason, and the neighbors had chosen celebration over conflict. For the first time, I understood that sometimes bureaucratic overreach isn't just inconvenient, it can be a catalyst for unexpected community bonding. As I watched my children place the final figurines by the front door, I smiled. Next year, I whispered to my spouse, we might just go full North Pole. My spouse laughed, shaking their head. The lights shone brilliantly that night, a beacon of festive resilience. Through the absurdity of one person's stubbornness, the neighborhood discovered the joy that comes from standing up for what's right, even if it's just Christmas lights. And as the snow fell softly, I realized that this holiday would be remembered not for conflict, but for the triumph of cheer, community, and a little sparkly defiance.